Welcome to another edition of Business Today, where we take an in-depth look at the business world. Today, as always, we are going to feature a personality segment, very special personality segment actually. And as always, we are going to talk about the market and have a market discussion later on the show as well. But first, as always, it is time for the personality segment, and we have a bombard for you today. We have with us Honorable Minister Naveen Dissanayake, who is currently the Minister for Plantation Industries. So let's take a look at him.
Honorable Minister Naveen Dissanayake is the current Minister of Plantation Industries. Prior to this, he was the Minister of Tourism and Sports, Minister of Public Management Reforms, Deputy Minister of Plantation Industries, and Minister of Investment Promotion. Minister Naveen Dissanayake received his primary education from St. Thomas's Preparatory School in Colombo and secondary education from Royal College, Colombo. Lawyer by profession, Minister Naveen Dissanayake holds a master's degree in finance and financial law from the University of London. He graduated from the University of Sussex in law and was called to the Bar of United Kingdom as the Barrister at Law from the Middle Temple. Holding various ministerial positions, Minister Naveen Dissanayake contributed his astounding services to the growth and development of the motherland in receiving national and international fame.
Welcome back. And Honorable Minister Naveen Dissanayake, he is here with us in the studio. Welcome to the show, Minister.
Thank you, Yovin. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Of course. Now, Minister, what areas actually fall under the regulation of the Ministry of Plantations?
So basically, this is a very old ministry. It came about after independence. Because even after independence, we were an agricultural country. So the Ministry of Plantation Industries formulates the policies and the regulations and monitors the growth of the tea, rubber and coconut sector in Sri Lanka. So I have 15 institutions coming under me, and as your show highlighted the fact that I was also the Deputy Minister of this ministry earlier, when I was in the earlier UNP government of 2001 to 2004. I had a good understanding and a basic framework of what to do when I took over as a minister. Of course, I was a minister in the government from 2015 and in sports and tourism, and which I cherished and enjoyed for 8 months. And I took very important radical measures to clean up the sports sector in Sri Lanka. But unfortunately, I couldn't complete my mission. Whereas here, I feel in another 2 years, if I have the opportunity of doing this, I would be able to add value to this sector in a substantial way, and hopefully leave my mark as a Minister of Plantation Industries.
So, since taking over the office of Plantation Industries Minister, how has your experience been?
My experience has been rough, tough, and also a lot of happiness, but also very challenging for me, because unfortunately we went through a very turbulent time in terms of overall agricultural production from 2015, and the weather patterns, as you know, there was a drought the country faced. Then we went to the other extreme of having a very rainy kind of a situation where there were torrential rains. So this is all, I think it's a challenge for countries, tropical countries like Sri Lanka. Even in the tea sector, we find that so-called cooler climes are actually changing weather patterns. So teas that are grown in Norelia and the high grows, probably in 10 to 15 years, their taste and their flavor and their color might change, because you see an overall shift in weather patterns. I think it is a major policy change that Sri Lanka has to look at, because we can't take the weather for granted, and our overall macroeconomic conditions will of course be affected if the weather patterns also change. So for example, when there is a flood damage government will have to distribute huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, 6 or 7 billion rupees, all from the public coffers. So these are actually unaccounted funds, funds that have not been budgeted. Provisions will have to be made, and then you will have to cut the money from somewhere and pump it in. So that is a duty of a government. But what I'm saying is the weather patterns of this country are fast changing, and our generation in 10, 15, 20 years time we'll have to deal with a different scenario altogether.
Now, of course, there is the weather aspect, but there are a lot of other conditions that do affect reactionary measures.
Yeah.
But what type of R&D does go into those plantation industries to make sure that they can weather the storm and they can continue onwards?
Well, we have fortunately been lucky. I mean, in terms of weather patterns, we haven't had major disasters. R&D is very important in any sector. As you know, a multinational company like Unilever or Sony, or any multinational company, Exxon or whatever, they will at least put 7% of their revenue into R&D. This is a global practice, because without R&D you can't survive. In our country, we only put less than 1% of our GDP into R&D. So there is no R&D culture in our country. Maybe the private companies are doing it, but we as a nation do not have an R&D culture. We like to kind of sustain things, keep things going, keep the status quo, keep things static. But really the name of the game is innovation. And I've been telling my friends in the tea industry, the rubber industry and the coconut industry, you have to reinvest in R&D to get better results. You might not get it in 2-3 years, but you must look at the long-term view of things.
Is there plans like regulation plans to encourage R&D?
Well, we try to tell companies that you have to do R&D. We can't force them, because as you know, the private sector economy is we cannot regulate it anymore. We shouldn't regulate it anymore, because there is dynamism in the private sector. But they must look at R&D in a very positive way. Now I see that happening in the apparel industry, where the apparel companies have got together. They have their R&D centers. I don't want to mention names, but perhaps you are aware of 2 or 3 larger companies who are hitting the 1 billion turnover mark. They have their own R&D centers, and then they look at various fabrics, various clothing, the trends that are in the global scene, and they adjust their local production accordingly. We spend very small amounts of funds. For example, the Tea Research Institute, which comes under me, probably spends about 400 million rupees, which is not a large amount. Then the coconut and the rubber research institutes also around that much. So altogether, the 3 institutes that come under me close to about $10 million. So what is $10 million in R&D? And that $10 million is about 60% is going into recurrent expenditure, which you are paying salaries and keeping the institution going, and only about 40% to capital expenditure. But I'm very happy during my 2.5 years I have been able to increase the spending in R&D, and I hope the government looks at it positively and I can get more funding for my research institutions.
Of course. Now, talking about the industries, the main 3 industries, tea, rubber, coconuts, what is the status of their exports, and what is the status of their plantations?
Very good. I think it's very pertinent you ask this question, because as you know, over the last 20 years, the two decades, our economy has diversified from a largely agricultural economy to a industry and service oriented economy. So much so that nearly 56% of our GDP is now coming from the services sector. For the agriculture sector, this is the agriculture sector composition 2017. Now I'm reading the statistics from the annual report of the Ministry of Finance, page 17. 4% of the GDP is coming from rubber, 10% from tea, and 10% from coconut, that is from palm oil and coconut related products. So you see that in the agricultural sector, 24%, nearly 1/4 of the total agricultural sector is coming from my 3 sectors. So still how substantial the sector is. Nearly 2 million people totally employed by these three sectors, and bringing in close to 2 billion USD.
Yeah.
So that is actually, if you combine the three, it is bigger than the sector. Still, yeah. If you combine the three, it's still bigger than the apparel sector. But unfortunately, over the years, it has not got the necessary treatment or necessary policy inputs that the government should give, because there is a view that okay, this is kind of agriculture. It is not an industry that is going to be there for long. You know, people, the younger generation are not going into agriculture. There is a kind of a thinking that there is no money in the agriculture sector. But actually, you know, it's wrong, because maybe I also thought that when I came in. But my thinking is that there's a lot of value addition to be made in the agriculture sector. So according to this, these statistics, I'm happy to say, tea production showed significant improvement, 4% in 2017, reflecting an expansion of extent of tea 5.2% in 2017. The average Colombo auction price increased by 31.1% to 620.44 per kilogram. I'm happy to say to the people of Sri Lanka that our teas are getting the highest price in any auction, in the Colombo auction, in anywhere in the world. So this is the highest price that any country is getting for their teas, the prices that we are getting now. So I'm very happy, and I'm thanking the exporters, all the producers, this occasion, the tea smallholders, for keeping this and doing this. Rubber grew by 4.9% in 2017 compared to negative growth of 10% in 2016. So rubber is a very unique product, because our country doesn't produce much rubber. In the Korean War in the 1960s, we produced a lot of rubber, maybe the top 3 rubber producing country in the world. Today we are in the top 10, but very marginal amount. So what happened in 1977 was, when President Jayawardena came to power, he liberalized this sector. So that the free trade zones, we were able to, the government at that time, through the free trade zones, they allowed rubber value addition to happen. So people were able to come and set up rubber factories here. For example, the tire market in the US, we have a monopoly on that. Can you believe that?
Still?
Our tires produced in Sri Lanka are getting the premium in the US. So companies like Lodestar are doing exceptionally well, because we allowed rubber to come in, and the raw rubber comes into the duty-free zone, to the free trade zone, and then through the zone the value addition happens, and then it is exported. Gloves are also like that. So close to $1 billion are made by rubber value addition. Coconut, unfortunately, because of the drought, we've had a setback. I've tried my best to face this crisis. That's why coconut prices have gone up. A coconut nut is about 80 rupees now. It should be about between 50 to 60 rupees. But the prices are high because there's no coconut nuts in the market. So coconut and coconut related products contracted by 19.5% in 2017 compared to negative growth of 0.8% in 2016. So we hope that the coconut production will come back to normal by the second quarter, third quarter of this year.
This year itself, it will pick up.
We hope it will pick up. And we hope with the increase in production of coconut nuts, the prices will also come down, and I think the consumers will be happy, because one of the main reasons of the government being unpopular is, I think, the coconut prices and the cost of living. So if you look at the basket of index of consumer goods, coconut is a very important commodity for Sri Lankans, and it is essential that we have relatively cheap coconut prices for consumers.
Now, previously, I think you mentioned a very important point, that the youth, the new workforce doesn't look at those industries as applicable or as lucrative industries. Are there any methods or efforts made to combat this, or to promote it in such a way that people do go into those industries?
Well, I mean, because it's, I think, a generational thing also. I mean, the parents of plantation employees, they don't see themselves working in the fields. You know, they don't. A son or a daughter of a tea plucker probably would not want to do the same thing that the father or the mother did.
No,
Same with a rubber tapper.
Yeah.
So we have been having a very deep dialogue with the stakeholders of these three sectors. Where do you want to see the industry in 20 years' time? So for the tea sector, we are thinking of actual what you call the outgrow model, where the ownership of the land is through a legal mechanism given to the family. So they will actually pluck the tea in the larger estates, and then the larger estate will manage the land. They might give the fertilizer and all that, but there is then a sense of ownership, you know, and there's a sense of equity, so that the workers can feel this. I'm part of this.
Okay, so they get the
that's right. Yeah, they either the part of the profit or the land, or their sense of ownership. Because if you don't come up with a new model, then the question of sustainability comes up. So now we are for tea, we are producing between 300 to 340 million kilograms. All that tea is snapped up in the auctions. I mean, we are getting the highest prices, but we should be looking at increasing our tea production. So 73, believe me when I say this, 73% of our tea production is now coming from smallholders.
Smallest.
Yes, that is the smallholders are people who have less than 5 hectares of land. So the tea industry has diversified from the 1950s and the 60s, from large plantation companies to smaller holders. So that is a huge revolution that happened in this country, and the UNP must take credit for that, because it's only from 1977 onwards that these ownership of the lands were given to the smallholders to cultivate. So what is the next step? What is the next turn that is going to come? So I see value addition. I see the black tea in bulk being turned to value-added tea. That is the first transformation. I see our teas fetching a premium in the international tea markets. We have to sustain our brand image, the Ceylon, pure Ceylon tea image, and protect that at all costs, and then push for new markets. So in the coconut sector, there is a huge demand, as you know, a person being you in the US, when you go to a supermarket there, you see the superfood, you know, it is a superfood today. So you see the virgin coconut oil, you see the coconut water, you see desiccated coconut, you see a multi-varied coconut products being consumed by various segments of the market. So unfortunately for us, we are only producing 3,000 million nuts. So we are now looking at the north and east to expand our coconut production. Rubber, I think the way to go is actually to enhance this value addition process. I have been talking to the Prime Minister and the President on having another 2 or 3 rubber zones in Sri Lanka, where the government makes an initial investment in infrastructure close to the port, maybe Hambantota port, where there are only exclusive rubber companies that come in, set up factories, and then do the exports. So that is the overall vision I see. For younger people, this has to be made attractive. It has to be made sustainable, and the younger people must see a future. And for that, they must be given a stake, ownership in the industry, and companies must accept that the younger generation are people who have a lot of values and ethics. They can't be exploited. You know, that exploitation model has to come out, and the enhancement model has to come in.
So you mentioned the discussion about the new rubber zones. Was it a positive outlook?
Yes, I think we can, once we get over this initial period of stabilizing the economy, then we can look at, now we have gone into the Hambantota zone. So we are looking at new lands to acquire, and Jayawardena model of putting free trade zones must be taken further, because that is the way to create employment, and you can't be pumping and putting political catchers into government jobs. That's not the way to go forward. I mean, that you can have that, but that can't be the main source of employment. Main source of employment has to be that the private sector is the engine of growth, and young people through their qualifications must work hard and come up the hard way. Start at the bottom and work to the top. So that is the model of social mobility.
Yeah.
So that is the model that I think we should aspire to. People are used to a certain model in Sri Lanka. I as a politician, am finding it frustrating because politicians, basically I tell now, politicians are job agents.
Right.
We have to get jobs for people. We have to look at the CVs. And people who work for us in political campaigns, they expect jobs. So this is a really a catch-22 situation for politicians like me, because we want to implement policies,
Yeah.
and our focus and thrust should be on policies. But mostly we are doing physical activity of, that is also needed.
Yeah.
I think a politician should be dynamic enough to have physical activity and also the mental policy framework in place. But most of the time, about 85% of our time is spent on physical activity, looking at applications, going to funeral houses, going to marriage ceremonies, and just being a nice chap all the time, without actually doing the policy framework. So I think it's high time that the people of this country also realize this, and it's not a big country, 20 million people. We can make the important turn. But for that, I think the key will be our generation. We must look at this anew and realize that time is running out for Sri Lanka, because other countries are very catching up fast. One classic example is Bangladesh, where they have even beaten us in cricket now, and they even overtaking us in industrial and services sector. You look at some big companies in Sri Lanka, they're seriously looking at relocating to Bangladesh, because it's more competitive and the costs are cheaper.
So is there a plan to increase competitiveness in the international
Well, these are factors. I think the private sector, the government, the leaders, the people of this country. I'm speaking English to you now.
Yeah.
I don't know the reach of program. I hope there are some, maybe at least 5 lakhs of English speaking people who understand what we are saying. We have English education from primary, secondary, up to the secondary level, 10 years, at least 12 years of English education. Right up to O-level, we have 10 years of English education. So with 10 years of English education, Uvin, don't you think that these boys and girls should be able to at least communicate in English?
Yeah.
It should be the case. So, but we can't. So who is to blame? Is it the teachers? Is it the education system that is not monitoring them? Are we not having any standards? So these are major issues, because we are spending nearly 200 billion rupees on education.
Yeah.
And what is the end product? Is it the children? Only 20,000 get into university. Balance 180,000 out of the system. So you can understand the frustration of the children, and understand the frustration of the parents, and understand the frustration of the country, who have an unemployable student population. Okay. So I think these are major policy things that we have to look at now. And people are used to a very kind of dependent culture in Sri Lanka. You have to give everything to Sri Lankans. So the culture should be, you should work and get something. But now the culture is, give me something, give me something, give me something. So I think as a country, I'm not talking as a politician, as a country, where do we want to go in 10 years' time? Do we just want to go day to day like we are doing now, or have a kind of a grand kind of a vision and then work towards that? And of course, some unpopular decisions might have to be made.
Of course. Now, especially regarding the tea industry and a lot of stuff in terms of innovation and in terms of exporting, a lot of the tea industry has comments on the offset tea. Apart from the pure Ceylon tea that is labeled and exported to other countries, that is not allowed to be exported.
What is offset tea?
It is a byproduct of the produced tea.
At the moment, the Colombo Traders Association, the CTTA, with the tea board, they regulates the auctions. We have the best auction system. I'm very proud to say we have the best auction system in the world for tea. Right? It is strictly monitored. It's highly regulated. There might be guys who are trying to be very naughty and trying to put bad teas into the auction. but most of the teas are actually tested. They go through a very strict quality process. All the teas that are produced in Sri Lanka that are exported are going through the auction.
Yeah.
So there is no provision for bad teas to go through, and that is why the Pure Ceylon tea name has been able to sustain itself.
Yeah.
And it is my job as minister to make sure that is the case.
Oh.
So I will ensure that our teas are the best teas in the world, and I will ensure that whatever mechanisms I have, my resources are stranded. As you know, the tea board is a regulatory arm. We are not a policeman. We cannot regulate this huge industry with 700 odd factories.
Yeah.
But we are very strict on our policies. We don't want anybody to adulterate our teas or to put sugar in them, and to have shortcuts and get higher prices by kind of adding all this muck to our teas.
Yeah.
I will be very hard as a minister coming down on them and ensuring that the tea industry is clean. But I can't do that alone. The tea industry must do it on its. They must have a conscience. Now, your father is a person who's in the tea industry. I think he knows about this issue. So the tea industry, all the stakeholders must come together and ensure that the tea industry is clean.
Of course. Now, are there any new developments as a government or as the Ministry of Plantations that we should look forward to?
Yeah, well, the tea sector, I think we are looking at several options. For example, China, for example, is a very valid and a very attractive market for us. We are looking at expanding in the Chinese market. We are looking at new markets in Europe and also in Africa. There are certain markets that we can look at. We want to consolidate our markets in the Middle East, like Iran and Iraq. Is actually the way forward for tea is to actually bring the yield up. To bring our yields up. New technology that is going to come in, to use sustainable agriculture in the future, and also actually to look at the whole business model of growing tea, because the cost of production is very high. So you have to bring the cost of production down again through technology. Maybe now, for example, electricity is very costly in Sri Lanka by using the normal traditional methods. Maybe we can look at solar and alternative methods in the factories. We have to ensure the cleanliness of our tea, so that once the cleanliness is ensured, we can get the optimum prices. There is, of course, the argument that our teas are overpriced and that we are losing our markets. We have lost our markets in certain countries like Egypt and the UK. But I don't think Sri Lanka should be promoted as a blending hub. Purely for one reason, and that is a question that I always ask the proponents of blending. There are many. There are a lot of people who have diverse views on how to go forward. Can you ensure that the price for Ceylon tea, which we are getting now, which is average 620.44, does not come down? Because if this price comes down, Zubin, then there's a huge social cost we have to pay. The farmers are going to be upset. They won't be able to sustain their lives. The factories are going to lose out. The exporters are going to lose out. Certain exporters want lower price for our teas, but overall, it can be a very dangerous policy that we make if we allow blending without the safeguards. There must be safeguards coming in where if there are teas coming into a particular highly monitored and regulated zone, the blending happens and the tea goes out. But there is no unanimity or consensus among the stakeholders for this way to happen. For coconut, of course, I think the main task is to get our production up, get our coconuts up. Then there will be enough nuts for the value-added sector. I see huge potential here, and maybe in 7 to 8 years' time, coconut might be outperforming tea. I don't know. I just feel that. So for all that to happen, we must have sustainable agriculture policies, and we must have the land and the production in place and the supply chain to do that.
Of course. And we want to thank Honorable Minister Naveen Dissanayake for joining us. It was a very informative discussion, and thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Of course. And after the break, Dunanjali will be with you to take you through a very interesting market discussion. But let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Today. And now we go on for the discussion on the stock market. Sustainable health and well-being of a population is a prerequisite of the overall economic and health social development of a nation. As many other countries, Sri Lanka is also experiencing the epidemiological transition. Healthcare services has a pivotal role to play in regard to this. Today's discussion is on key health trends and performance of healthcare industry. For an in-depth discussion, we have invited Product Head of Frontier Research, Mr. Travis Gomez. Travis currently manages Frontier News Curation products and is involved in developing Frontier's remote team of news curators and analysts. Welcome to Business Today, Mr. Travis.
Thank you.
Sri Lanka is privileged with widespread free health facilities and free education. And there are several key health trends in reference to Sri Lankan aspect. If we begin with fertility, elaborate on the current status of fertility in the Sri Lankan context.
Yes, so if you look at when it comes to health trends, I mean, usually what we expect is when a country goes through what we call a demographic transition. So that is when typically what happens is when the health standards improve, when people's living standards improve, what happens is as the nutrition levels go up, what we usually observe is that the fertility rates start to come down. And that has been the trend that we've seen in Sri Lanka since the 1960s till about the late 90s. We saw this fertility rate continuously coming down. And actually by 1998, it actually came down below what is called the replacement level. So that is essentially the level, if it's below that, that means that the replacement population is going to be less. Okay, but something strange that started to happen was the fertility rate actually started to pick up since then. And if you look at the most recent from the census data, the 2011-12 one, it's come up to 2.4, which is above even countries in the region like Bangladesh. So there's a couple of, so looking at this trend, this is kind of a bit strange situation. And if you look at some of the factors that might contribute to that, one thing that we've observed is that actually the age at which people are getting married has been coming down. So in the 90s, it was, if you take for females, it was around 26, 28 years. It has like come down to about 23, 24 in the more recent data. At the same time, a larger number of the population is also getting married, or the number who is staying unmarried is actually coming down. So that has been one factor. Apart from that, there are a number of other factors as well that contribute to it. So it could be even these things like particularly when there's some sort of like natural disaster, or given the conflict that we're having, that post-conflict, what tends to happen is that people become more optimistic about the future, and as a result they might be more willing to have children. So it's a bit early to say whether this trend is going to continue, because this has a significant impact in terms of our population. Because as per the previous forecasts that they had about population, they were expecting by 2040 to have about, I think the numbers were that you'd have like 22 to 23, 24 million population. But now with these new fertility numbers, there might be an additional 1 to 4 million people by that same time. So these changes in the fertility can have a significant impact.
Right. And WHO states that NCD, that is non-communicable diseases, are estimated to account for 25% of the total deaths in Sri Lanka. Brief us on what non-communicable diseases are and the prevalent status in Sri Lanka at the moment.
So the non-communicable diseases, I mean, the popular ones would be like anything related to cardiovascular or like cancer, blood pressure. Those are the typical ones that we would see. And usually this is something that normally happens when, as the countries, as income levels go up, as the aging population goes up, this naturally tends to increase. But the challenge is, unlike when it comes to communicable diseases or things like malaria or things like that, which you can immunize people against and which you can cure through that, fighting NCDs is much more difficult, because that requires like a lifestyle change. So really, more than actually trying to cure it, what you need to, the focus is very much on prevention. So that is this concept of wellness. And so that's really an opportunity for a lot of the private hospitals to capitalize on, because maybe the government hospitals may not be as geared to focus on that wellness aspect. So because of that, a lot of the private hospitals, this will be an opportunity. So to take a recent example, Navaloka, they actually have opened this thing called what they call Premier Wellness Center. So so a lot of focus is like on nutrition, on exercise, and having these specific programs for that. So that is really an area that we need more investment on, given that our population is aging as well. So that's an area to focus on for the companies.
And regarding the aging population, which are the aspects to be considered, and how well is Sri Lanka prepared to take up this challenge and caring for the aging population?
Yeah, so at the same time, when you would see like fertility rates coming down, you also at the same time tend to see aging population, because as life expectancy improve. And in Sri Lanka case, that has been the situation. So right now, the stats are like there's about 2 million people above the age of 65. So that's about 10% of the population. And the projections are we are seeing very strong high growth rates compared to the region in terms of the growth in that aging population. So the projections right now are by 2040, about 1/4 of the population will be over 65. So with that, there's a lot of opportunities as well as challenges. So, I mean, if you take like at an economic perspective, this has major challenges in terms of like things like pensions and things like public healthcare expenditure. But also there's a lot of opportunities, because this means there's like higher demand for like these things like geriatric care and having like basically assisted living sort of things. So because of that, there's a lot of scope for investment that can go into this area as well.
And regarding the female participation in the labor force, when we consider the relationship between health conditions, fertility, and female participation in the labor force, what is the reality in the local context, in the status that is reflected?
Yeah, so when it comes to, so there's a strong connection between the demographic factors and labor force, particularly the labor force participation. So usually what we expect is that as a country develops, as the fertility rates come down, as the child mortality rates come down, what we expect usually is that the female participation in the labor force should increase. Okay? But in Sri Lanka's case, it has improved. But what we've seen is that for the past couple of years, it's kind of just stagnated. It's basically been below 50% for a long time. And if you look at it, if you look at some of the reasons for it, there are a couple of broadly two reasons. So one is in terms of there are like cultural and like social factors. So those are it's not something that is unique to Sri Lanka. In a lot of countries that go through this transition, it's only at the very late stage that you see actually these cultures and these societies shifting, where more people will start to more women will start to enter the labor force. Another factor is also due to a lack of support in terms of having like daycare centers and like facilities to actually to accommodate women who have children to make it easier for them to transition back into work. So that's another area really for policymakers to look at, because that has been somewhat neglected. And at the same time, a lot of the private firms also, it's something they should look at more seriously in terms of facilitating this, because definitely it's something that you cannot ignore. Because what happens is, when in this demographic transition, as the population ages, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a bigger amount of people who are dependent on people who are working. So what happens is the working age population is shrinking. So on the one hand, what you want is you want more people, the people who are working currently, you want them to improve their skills. At the same time, in order to get more economic activity, you want the people who are not working to start working more. So that's, the ready solution there is the female participation. So that's definitely something you need to focus on a lot.
Right. With all that, we covered most of the key factors that was influencing and the current situation of the health sector. And we thank you, Mr. Travis Gomez, for coming here to the studio. And this is the product head of Frontiers Research. And with that, we wind up today's edition of Business Today. Do join us next Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. on Channel I.